Hey, everybody. My name is Ben Baby. I cover the Cincinnati Bengals for ESPN's NFL Nation. And for those of you who saw the Bengals take on the New Orleans Saints, you saw a familiar guy in a familiar place do a lot of familiar things. And that guy would be number 9, Joe Burrow, back in Louisiana for the first time since he helped LSU win that national championship in 2020. I was out there at that game. I saw so many Burrow jerseys. You saw a lot of those LSU number 9s. You saw a lot with the Cajun spellings of Burrow. You saw his family rocking the blend, the Bengals number 9 with the Burrow, Burreuaux, gave it that little Louisiana flair to it. And Burrow showed that flair that he showed when he was at LSU. You know, he had his best game of the season in that Bengals 30-26 win over the Saints. And, you know, you look at that performance and you go, is this the guy that we thought we were going to get at the beginning of the season? And that's not to knock Joe, but it's saying, oh, this is that Joe Burrow that we've been talking about, that a lot of people think that he can be in the NFL. And, you know, when you look at it, like I said, that was his best game of the season. And that begs the question, is the Bengals offense now ready to take off? Is Joe Burrow ready to take off and really get this thing rolling? And that is going to be the thing that may dictate how the AFC North goes the rest of the season and how this Bengals teams go. You know, when you look at what they did well at the end of last season, it was Joe Burrow slinging it around. We remember those performances against Kansas City, against Baltimore, when he would just go out there and say, you know, Jamar Chase is down there somewhere, and he'd throw it deep, and Jamar Chase would make a great play or he'd catch something underneath, and that would work out really well for that offense. It was an offense that was number 1 in the NFL in yards per attempt. And so far this season, we haven't really seen everything clicking. And, you know, we'd asked the Bengals coaches, specifically Coach Zach Taylor, and he pointed out that, you know, we've had some turnover issues. We haven't started games well. You know, we've had to play from behind, and that's why the offense maybe hasn't clicked. And, you know, they weren't really keen on overreacting. And me and several other media members have been asking questions about that offense, whether Zach Taylor was the right play caller, whether there were discussions about whether things should be made, you know, massive tweaks should be made on the offensive side of the ball. And he said, don't overreact. You know, it's a small sample size. And, you know, just because, you know, a couple plays didn't go our way, you know, the Bengals losing 3 of their first 5 games, essentially on the last play, which has never really happened in quite some time. I mean, there's a historic stat for it that is right now slipping the top of my head. But the fact it hasn't happened very often, if at all, shows you how differently things could have been going into that Saints game. And sure enough, you know, what Zach Taylor said came to fruition, because the productivity the Bengals showed in that game against New Orleans really flipped a lot of their metrics, specifically from like week 3 to week 6, that 4-game span. You know, their offensive, you know, expected points added per play took a big jump. Their touchdowns per drive took a big jump. And when you look at it against New Orleans specifically, you know, they were credited with 9 drives, but really only had 8 if you exclude the final drive where they took a kneel and they ended the game. They scored touchdowns on 4 of their 8 drives, which is massive. You know, that 50% rate led the NFL in week 6, and their designed pass attempts, that also led the league during week 6. And, you know, I asked Zach Taylor about whether they wanted to do a lot of quick game stuff, because when we spoke to Joe Burrow after the game, he said that, you know, it was good to kind of get in the rhythm early and being able to see those completions. You know, you're able to go ahead. It's like almost like a basketball player seeing those shots go in. It gives you that confidence to go out there and just keep things humming. And, you know, I asked Zach about it. He said, you know, we really weren't calling a lot of quick game stuff. You know, it was really a lot of RPOs or run pass options. So what that is that gives Joe Burrow a lot of freedom to make a lot of decisions in real time and say, okay, I know what the numbers are going to look like. You know, if I feel like this is going to be a good look, I'm handing the ball off to Joe Mixon. Otherwise, I'm pulling it and I'm throwing it to my pass option on that play. And Zach Taylor said, you know, the numbers say we only ran the ball X amount of times, especially early, but, you know, we had more runs called. It's that Burrow checked out of them. And that's what I found really interesting, because when you look at this Bengals offense, it really gives the quarterback a lot of autonomy. You're able to go out and make a lot of checks. You know, Zach Taylor has talked about in the past a lot about Burrow essentially having 2 plays at the line of scrimmage, and he can either check into one or the other depending on what he sees out of the defense. And, you know, there was a question about QB sneaks and how that goes. And I asked Joe, I said, yeah, don't you usually go up with 2 plays and you can check out of it if you don't want? He goes, well, do you want me to just give you the whole play call? And I said, I mean, if you want me to, you can. Or if you want to, you can. I'm not going to stop you, Joe. But, when you look at it, that is what makes him really special. And that's why the Bengals liked him, his decision-making, the way he processes the game. And that's what the Bengals really liked out of him when they drafted him with the first overall pick. I mean, go and take that touchdown play that Jamar Chase had that sealed the game. Joe said that whenever he saw the defensive look, that's exactly where he was going with the ball. So what happens is you get the ball to Jamar Chase quickly. Now there's more, once Jamar beats his man, the quarterback, then that puts more space between him and the safety. Instead of, if Joe had seen it late, then the safety maybe comes down, the spacing may look a little bit different. Instead, Joe gets the ball out quickly, Jamar gets it, and then he sees Tyrann Mathieu. And I asked Jamar, what do you see when that play was kind of unfolding? He said, I just want to burn him. And sure enough, he has a lot of space, gets downhill, and is able to get past Tyrann Mathieu, who was a legend at LSU. You had LSU legend on LSU legend, and sure enough, Jamar gets makes a couple guys miss, scores a touchdown, tries to get a fine by punting the ball into the Superdome stands. He did not accomplish his task, so he does save a little bit of money, even if he missed out. But it shows you how good Joe Burrow can be. When you look at his total QBR, it was the best of any game he had, including last year's postseason run, dating back to week 16, I believe, of the 2021 season. And when you look at how he operated, how he was able to take some of the stuff underneath, especially, on that touchdown throw he had to Joe Mixon and some various plays throughout the game, that's what is going to help that offense really open things up, especially when you have teams playing a lot of too high safeties or cover two, where they're taking away those big shots at the back of the defense, which is what the Bengals and specifically Joe and Jamar did so well last season by taking that underneath stuff and by taking advantage of those soft zone coverages. You're going to end up getting those big plays that haven't really been there this season. And when you look at the air yards per, that Joe had, so the amount of time, when you look at yards, to explain this, you see yards in the box score, and yes, that's total yards on a play, but what happens if a guy throws the ball for 5 yards in the air and then, the receiver breaks it off for a 60-yard touchdown, which is what happened with the Jamar Chase play. There's only a certain amount of yards that the ball is in the air. So that's classified as air yards. And Joe Burrow, a lot of the air yards that he had or attempts were on 10 air yards or less. So they were really working that short game and behind the line of scrimmage and going quick. You look at his time to throw, where that ranked also under 2.5 seconds, which is kind of the threshold between short and long. And I think that might be a blueprint for them moving forward. And we talked about, how many designed pass plays they had, how many shotgun looks they had. And that was a little unique for what the Bengals have had so far this season. And Zach Taylor said that was a byproduct of the Saints being really good against the run. And so they knew going into the game, they needed to throw the ball a lot. Well, if I'm Zach Taylor and I'm the Bengals, I say, maybe we just pretend every team is really good against the run. And we just say, we're going to go out and throw the ball that way and attack that way, and maybe force defenses to change the way that they defend us. And because when you look at it, we've talked about this on this channel. If you've liked and you've subscribed, you should definitely do that. If you haven't, we talked about this offense, what makes this unique. We've talked about T. Higgins. We've talked about Joe Mixon and the struggles he's had. He's starting to get the ball rolling a little bit. But all these playmakers, Chase, Higgins, Boyd, Hurst, and then Joe Burrow, that number 9, when he's clicking and when he's operating, he has so much control of this offense. He has so much say in this offense. It's why he likes being in Cincinnati and playing for this coaching staff. When everything's clicking, this can be one of the best offenses in the NFL. And I think that's why there's been so much frustration from Bengals fans through the first 5 weeks of the season. When you look at the rates, you look at the lack of points, you see on paper and you say, this thing should be a little bit better. Why isn't it better? And week 6, we saw all of that come to fruition. Now you have the Bengals. They have, some soft opponents in front of them, opponents they should beat, starting this weekend with Atlanta. It's a good Atlanta team, but I think that the Bengals will be favored for a reason. When you look at it as a game they definitely need to take care of. And then as they progress in a very tight AFC North race, you got to win the ones you're supposed to win if you want to repeat as division champs, and then take on those big foes like Kansas City and Buffalo, who had another great game in week 6. And those are going to be the 2 teams everybody thinks will be the front runners to win the AFC. But if Burrow is playing like Burrow and the guy that we saw in the Superdome, not just in his days at LSU, but on Sunday against New Orleans, that's a very potent guy that you have under center, and who's not really under center. He's going to be in shotgun. He's going to be directing the traffic, and he's going to be a lot for defensive coordinators to handle. So that will definitely be something to watch. And if the Bengals can get that humming, look out, because that could be the offense that we all thought they could be at the beginning of the season.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.